this is AMK. This is part 3. We're going to look at the statements from 3 individuals: the neighbor, Holly Shrepfer, Pam Hildebrand Clark, and Sandra Toffolini. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And I'm just going to do a quick read-through these statements so I can spend more time on the next part, which will be the Criminal Investigation Division's walkthrough of the Benoit residence. So let's get started with part 3. Alright, let's do a quick catch-up. In part 2, we learned that Holly Shrepfer, the neighbor, was the first to enter the home or the crime scene. In the first case summary, the neighbor stated little Daniel had been murdered. In the second case summary, the neighbor says the family was dead. And why was the neighbor the first to enter the home? Because somebody from the WWE told a 911 dispatcher in Fayette County, Georgia, to contact that specific neighbor. The statements for these 3 particular individuals are the only statements that are included here. Later there are some interviews with other people, but as far as sections of this file specifically labeled statement, only these 3 individuals fall under that description. So we're going to start with Holly Shrepfer's statement. I introduced myself and spoke with Holly Shrepfer, and just a quick reminder that I, in this instance, is Detective Harper from the Fayette County Criminal Investigation Division, as other investigators entered the home through a side entry door in front of the garage. Shrepfer told me how she was asked by deputies to assist with the dogs. Holly Shrepfer advised she kenneled the dogs and began going through the home, calling out to Daniel and Nancy Benoit. She stated that she went directly to Daniel's upstairs room and found him on his bed, face down, deceased and discolored. Shrepfer said she made her way to a bonus room over the garage where Nancy Benoit normally watches television and found her lying in the floor. She added that it appeared Nancy Benoit had been strangled. Holly Shrepfer advised she did not go to the basement. During our conversation and in a later statement, and we'll look into that later statement as well after this, Shrepfer advised past events as follows. Shrepfer stated she last saw Chris Benoit around 8:30 Friday, June 22, 2007, as he dropped Daniel off at their horse riding camp. Shrepfer explained the camp was at her home next door to the Benoit home. Shrepfer stated the only thing she thought was strange at the time was how quickly and recklessly Chris drove up the driveway to drop off Daniel. Shrepfer stated that on Thursday, Chris simply let Daniel out at the end of the driveway. Nancy picked up Daniel Benoit around 12 p.m. noon on Friday after horse riding camp. Shrepfer advised nothing appeared to be wrong and that Nancy and Daniel walked back to their house. She said it was the last time she saw them alive. Shrepfer stated she did get a phone call from the Benoit home at approximately 10 p.m. on Friday, June 22, 2007, but did not answer. While talking to Shrepfer, she became visibly upset for not answering the phone call. She said she may have been able to do something for Nancy or Daniel if she had answered the phone. Holly Shrepfer stated at approximately 8:30 a.m. the following morning, Saturday, June 23, 2007, she received a phone message from Chris Benoit. Shrepfer says Benoit called her from his cellular phone and left a message for her. And I think in that space is just whited out the phone number. Shrepfer stated Chris Benoit was curious if Daniel was supposed to be at horse riding camp that morning. In Chris Benoit's message, he said Daniel was sick and would not be able to make it. Shrepfer says when she returned home, she listened to the message and thought it was strange and unusual for Chris to call her. Shrepfer advised it was so unusual that she mentioned it to her husband. Shrepfer added that she saw Chris as somewhat antisocial, and it was out of character for him to initiate a conversation with them. Shrepfer stated that she called Chris Benoit back at about 3 p.m. on Saturday, June 23rd. Shrepfer says Chris wanted to know if any of her family had been sick because Daniel was up all night with food poisoning. Shrepfer stated Chris told her he was feeling bad since there was nothing he could do for Daniel. She said Chris told her that Nancy also had a touch of the food poisoning, but was not as sick as Daniel, and that Chris told her he was feeling fine. She said Chris sounded very calm And the only unusual part about the conversation was that Chris called at all since he was so antisocial. Holly Shrepfer stated Chris Benoit told her that Nancy and Daniel wanted to lay low for a few days and recover. She said she talked frequently with Nancy Benoit and would visit from time to time. She said that Chris calling her may have been his way of discouraging any phone contact or visits with Nancy. I don't know, maybe he was just being a kind husband and making the call because his wife was sick. When I asked about the Benoits' relationship, Holly Shrepfer advised she knew the relationship had been rocky and that the couple had frequent fights. In the later statement, she explained how she met Nancy Benoit not long after they moved in the residence next door. She said she found Nancy walking down the street and took her to a hotel near the airport to stay a couple of nights. Shrepfer stated Nancy told her she was afraid to go home after Chris slammed her against the wall, and that they became friends after that. In the statement, Shrepfer also described how Nancy began abusing alcohol and prescription medication to help cope with her relationship with Chris and the demands of his career. Nancy told her that Chris had begun staying on the road between shows instead of coming home, and that Chris was also emotionally detached when he did return home. She said that she knew Chris could be very controlling, and he did not like Nancy to have friends or transportation. Shrepfer recalled one fight between the Benoits where Chris took their Hummer and hid it from Nancy. Shrepfer says she drove Nancy around the airport for a couple hours before they located the vehicle. Shrepfer also explained that Nancy found a stash of steroids in the home this year around the time of the Super Bowl, and that Nancy threw the steroids out, and that created a serious problem between Nancy and Chris, that it caused Chris to leave for about 2 weeks. Shrepfer said Nancy had begun walking every day and trying to cut back on alcohol to give Daniel a more stable home life. In the statement, Shrepfer explained that Nancy had repeatedly told her that Chris had become so detached that she had been contemplating moving back to Florida and closer to her family for a better life. Shrepfer says that Nancy confided in her and told her how concerned she was over Chris bee stinging and how agitated he had become. Shrepfer says that when Nancy used the term bee stinging, she physically acted like she was giving herself a shot in the butt. The comment is believed to be in reference to injecting growth hormones, or steroids. Shrepfer stated Nancy was very concerned about all of the drugs Chris was taking and how he was acting so differently. I'm going to interject here. Would you be surprised if I told you that in the forensic autopsy report there were no growth hormones in his system? Shrepfer stated Nancy was very concerned about all of the drugs Chris was taking and how he was acting so differently. I'm going to interject again. Would you be surprised if I told you that there were no drugs in his system? Shrepfer advised Nancy also told her about fights with Chris over his 2 children from a previous marriage, named David and Megan. The children were coming to visit from Canada, and that Chris had done nothing to prepare. She also described how upset Nancy was over a supposed $25,000 insurance policy, which was payable to Chris's first wife, Martina, and his other 2 children. Shrepfer says Nancy saw that as a slap in the face and could not believe there was any doubt that she would not do the right thing and provide for David and Megan should something ever happen to Chris. Shrepfer stated she knew there were problems, but never dreamed an incident such as this would happen. I concluded my conversation with Holly Shrepfer and stepped inside the Benoit home to meet with other investigators. Right here, we're going to jump further down in the report to Holly Shrepfer's handwritten statement. Okay, and now just a little further down in the file, we have this section, Holly Shrepfer and Pam Clark's statements. And as you can see, there's a handwritten statement. I'm going to try my best to read this handwriting. And again, just a quick read through. I, Holly Shrepfer, am making the following statement to Detective Brian Hergesel, who has identified himself as an investigator with the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. The Benoits moved in about 1 year ago. I met Nancy at 10 p.m. one night when I was driving home last summer and saw her walking down the street. I picked her up and drove her to the Marriott near the airport because she said she was scared of Chris, her husband. He had slammed her up against the wall and she didn't feel safe going home. She stayed there for 3 nights, maybe 2. We became friends after that, and she was obviously a woman in need trying to save her marriage. She told me on numerous occasions that she and Chris had a very rocky marriage and that she didn't know what to do. She was drinking heavily, taking sedatives to deal with the stress, and was very worried about Chris. She said Chris was not coming home in between trips like he used to and was not giving her any explanation. He was emotionally detached, and when he did come home, he did not acknowledge her or speak to her at all. Last summer, when her stepkids Megan and David came to stay with Nancy and Chris, he was barely home and traveled almost the whole time. They had a huge fight when he did come home, and Chris took the 3 kids to Graceland and left her for a few days. He was very controlling and did not like her to have friends or transportation. During one fight, Chris took the Hummer and hid it. I drove Nancy around the airport parking lots and vicinity for about 2 hours. We found the car, and she had an extra set of keys, and she took the car. She was very angry he would leave her and Daniel without a car, but very scared about what he would do. They had a huge fight around Super Bowl time because Nancy threw out his stash of steroids that he kept in his cowboy boots. He left for about 2 weeks after that fight. Nancy was walking every day and trying to cut back on wine because she really... Now this is upside down. I took a screenshot of it and flipped it to be able to read this next part. Okay, so this is the screenshot that I took of the next page. She really wanted to give Daniel a more stable home life and repeatedly told me over the last couple weeks, actually probably about 2 months, how detached Chris was. And she was contemplating moving back to Florida so she could have a better life. She was also very, very concerned with how agitated Chris was because he was bee stinging. She visually acted like she was giving herself a shot in the butt. He was bee stinging so much, and with all the drugs he was taking, he was acting different. They were fighting heavily because his 2 kids, Megan and David, were coming in from Canada, and he had done nothing towards setting up their flights, etc. Chris was supposed to be setting up braces for David, and Nancy was upset that he had not done anything about that. Nancy was extremely upset about a $25,000 insurance or something, which would go to the first wife and kids and not to her and Daniel. Nancy thought it was weird. She wasn't sure if it was a new policy or just something she had found out about. On Friday, I last saw Chris at 8:30 a.m. when he stopped at the end of the driveway and dropped off Daniel for horse riding lessons. And I need to interject here again because holy shit. Earlier in the statement, she said that she remembered it so clearly how Chris drove recklessly up the driveway to drop Daniel off on Friday. Remember? And on Thursday, she said he dropped him off at the end of the driveway. Okay, so moving on, Chris dropped Daniel off at the horse riding camp. Then Nancy came and picked up Daniel about 11:30, 11:45 and hung out for about half an hour before she and Daniel walked home. Chris called me at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday, 6:23 from his cell phone, and I thought it was a strange call and I mentioned it to my husband. He asked if anyone at my house had been sick because Daniel had been up all night with food poisoning and he felt bad because there was nothing he could do. He said he was fine and Nancy didn't get it as bad as Daniel. He was very calm and did not sound unusual at all. However, it was unusual he would call and talk and fill me in on anything because he was not a talker nor social at all with anybody. He said they were going to lay low for a few days and recover. I did not hear from anyone again. The cops came by today at 2 p.m. approximately and asked if I would restrain the dogs and see if the Benoits were home. So they asked if you would restrain the dogs and see if the Benoits were home? Okay. I put Carney and High Spot in their crates and looked around the kitchen. The walkie-talkie was on the counter and there were suitcases, which was odd because Chris always leaves Sunday for the airport. I walked into Nancy's master yelling, "Nancy, are you home?" So again, see, if you watch part 2, we're already getting a different story again. Nobody was there, so I yelled down to the basement and went up to the upstairs playroom. I looked in the bedrooms, and again, wouldn't there have been an odor? You didn't notice an odor. Listen to this. I looked in the bedrooms and entered Daniel's room last. He looked like he was asleep, and I thought maybe he was still really sick from the food poisoning. So you didn't notice a smell? As I got closer, I noticed the discoloration and something in Daniel's mouth and screamed and ran through the house calling for Nancy. And remember, while all of this is going on, the cops are waiting outside. I went up to her TV room, which is where she always hung out. I saw Nancy laying on the ground with a blanket over her. Her hair was messy and her face was a horrible blue-black, and she had a cable around her neck. I ran out, screaming to the officers. Just curious, what about this scream? And then she ran through the house. The police were outside. They didn't hear that scream? So many questions. And then it's signed, but again, no date. But I'm guessing it would have to be the 25th, right? Seeing as how the 25th was the day that the police were called for the welfare check, right? Okay, now we're going to read through the statement from Pam Clark. While at the residence, I learned, and I'll just remind you again, I, in these pages, refers to Detective Harper from the Criminal Investigation Division. Detective Turner had spoken with one of Nancy Benoit's best friends, Pam Hildebrand Clark, who resided in Tennessee. Pam told Detective Turner that she received a phone call from Nancy Benoit on June 18th, 2007, around 1 o'clock p.m., and Clark stated they spoke for what seemed like 3 hours. During the conversation and in a later statement, and we will also look at that statement right after this, Pam Clark advised that she met Nancy in 1996 and they became best friends. Clark advised they were both in the wrestling family. And Pam Clark is a relation to Mark Curtis, who was a manager, and he managed Cactus Jack, who is one of my all-time favorites. Mick Foley is amazing, and yes, that is a barbed wire bat. Bang, bang! Clark says she knew Nancy loved Chris very much and was very happy when Daniel was born, and that Daniel became Nancy's life. During their June 18th conversation, they talked about finding a good school for Daniel to start first grade and how well he was doing in the horse riding camp. Nancy told her she was upset about a life insurance policy she recently became aware of. The policy supposedly had Chris's ex-wife as the beneficiary, and that Nancy wanted Chris to change it over to her name, but he would not. According to Pam Clark, Nancy felt insulted by this and thought Chris did not trust her to take care of his other 2 children if something ever happened to him. This statement was consistent with the statement provided by Holly Schrepfer about Nancy being upset over an insurance policy. Clark advised Nancy was also concerned that Chris may be having an affair with one of the divas in the WWE. Nancy told her about going to a recent wrestling event in Dothan, Alabama, and how everyone seemed to be walking around on eggshells around her, as if they knew something she did not. Nancy also explained how she felt everyone was hiding something from her. Clark stated that Nancy was upset that Chris had been getting phone calls and would go outside to talk, only to return, avoiding her questions about who he had been talking to. Clark stated Nancy also believed Chris also had a prepaid cellular phone that Chris did not want her to know about. Clark said they also talked about how Chris's kids were coming in from Canada, and she wanted to spend time with the kids, unlike past years. Clark advised Nancy told her she did not feel like she knew Chris anymore. Nancy described how upset Chris still was over the death of his friend Eddie Guerrero, and told her that Chris was taking several different medications. Now, Eddie Guerrero was one of Chris Benoit's best friends. They were very close, and he was devastated when Eddie died, and people close to Chris Benoit say he never really got over Eddie's death. And Eddie Guerrero is the uncle of Chavo Guerrero, who is the one that received the strange text messages from Chris Benoit that we covered in part 2. Clark advised Nancy was worried that the medications may have begun to work against each other. Clark stated Nancy told her that Chris had been acting strange lately, and his mood swings had gotten to the point that he would pick fights with her over nothing. Nancy told her about how controlling Chris had become during his mood swings, that it had gotten to the point that Chris would call from the road and tell her what she should be cooking. Nancy told Clark that she felt like Chris was trying to control everything she did. Now, I'm going to interject here. Is it odd that they're saying Chris would call from the road and tell Nancy what she should be cooking, and then she ends up sick with food poison? I don't know. Maybe he was concerned someone was trying to harm them. Maybe he didn't want to tell Nancy this because he didn't want to alarm her. Maybe that would explain a new life insurance policy. Clark expressed how frustrated Nancy was over Chris being so quick to fight and was constantly putting her down after all that she had done for him over the years. Clark advised Nancy told her she needed to get away and visit her parents in Florida or her sister in North Carolina. Clark says Nancy wanted to start thinking about herself again, that she had the feeling Nancy was about to leave Chris. Pam says Nancy seemed ready to stand up for herself, but had a very bad feeling something was going to happen to her. Then their conversation turned to the recent death of a friend of theirs by the name of Sherry Martel. Sherry Martel, known as Sensational Sherry, probably most known for managing Macho Man Randy Savage during his feud with Hulk Hogan over Savage's former manager and real-life wife, Miss Elizabeth. Now that's interesting and a fun coincidence there, and we'll get into that in the next part when we go over the background into how Chris and Nancy met and how they ended up together. Martel was found dead in Alabama, and Nancy overheard the news say that foul play may have been involved. According to Pam Clark, Nancy told her she kept a record of everything Chris had ever done to her, just like she did with her past husband, Kevin Sullivan. And here we go, Kevin Sullivan, the man Nancy was married to before she married Chris Benoit. And we will get more into that story, like I just said, coming up in future videos. Nancy told Clark that the information was kept in a safe place. Clark believed it was possible Nancy had this information in a safety deposit box somewhere. And a little foreshadowing here. The search warrant for that safety deposit box and what was found in that box is included in these documents. Coming soon. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out. Clark stated Nancy made her promise that if anything happened to her, she would make sure that Chris was investigated. Clark said that Nancy told her she had a bad feeling that something would happen to her, but did not know how or when, and that it was a feeling Nancy could not shake, and she was fed up with feeling that way. Clark said that was the last time she spoke with Nancy Benoit, that on Monday, June 25th, when she found out about the deaths, she thought it was some kind of sick joke and called the Benoit house hoping someone would answer. So that's the end of Pam Clark's statement. Now we're going to go down further in the paper and look at another statement from Pam Clark. So this is interesting. There seems to be a handful of deaths that the Benoits were very concerned about, isn't there? Sherry Martel, Eddie Guerrero, and there's even a few others that maybe you're not so familiar with. More coming on that topic in upcoming videos. So is there a conspiracy here? I don't know for sure, but I know how much these people love to encode their 9/11s. Okay, so here we are beneath Holly Schrepfer's written statement. We have a typed statement from Pam Clark. My name is Pamela Hildebrand Clark, and I first met Nancy Benoit in 1996 through WCW. My late husband, Brian Hildebrand, aka Mark Curtis, worked for WCW as a referee. Nancy and Chris had just gotten together. Brian battled a 3-year bout with cancer. We became close friends with Chris and Nancy. We spent time at their home in Georgia and went on trips together. Brian passed away in September of 1999. They were both very close friends to me after Brian passed. Nancy stayed in touch with me all these years. She was my best friend. Nancy loved Chris very much, and he seemed to love her deeply as well. Then Daniel came along, and he was her world. She loved Daniel with all her heart. On June 18th, 2007, between 1:00 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., I got a call from Nancy. We talked for about 3 hours or so. She talked about Daniel. She was so proud of him. She had found a good school for him to start 1st grade. He was doing so well with the horse riding with Holly next door. She loved him so much. She was upset about a life insurance policy from Canada that Chris had. The reason being is that she found out it was still in his ex-wife's name. When she said something to him about changing it over to her name, he told her no, that he wanted something there to take care of his kids in Canada in case something ever happened to him. She was very insulted after all she had done for his children, that he would even think that if something happened to him, that she wouldn't make sure they were taken care of. She said she felt like he didn't know her at all anymore. I guess the question that I have about the life insurance policy is, what are the stipulations of the policy? Now, I don't know much about the laws with insurance policies, but I wonder if maybe he was trying to make sure his family in Canada wouldn't need to worry about any issues with the policy payout being delayed for any reason, or perhaps to avoid any taxes or fees. I know that there is different currency in Canada than in the United States, and that in September of 2007, and remember this incident happened in June of 2007, the Canadian dollar was on parity with the United States dollar for the first time in 31 years. So I guess my question here is, was this policy taken out in Canada or here in the United States? Because that could be a reason as to why he wasn't so willing to cancel that specific insurance policy. I'm just saying, if anybody watching has any thoughts or insight on that, please comment. I would love to know any thoughts on this possibility. And one other thing, life insurance policies do not pay out if the holder commits suicide. So let that sink in. Nancy said she was worried about Chris. She said that Chris was depressed and still upset over Eddie Guerrero's passing. She said Chris was on so many medications that she thought they were going against one another. His mood swings have gotten worse, and he was picking fights with her over nothing. She said he had been acting very strange lately. A few weeks ago, she said he went to the airport to pick him up, and he didn't get off the plane, so she went and called him. He finally answered the phone. He was still at the hotel asleep. She was worried about all the meds that he was taking. She said he didn't come home until the next day. She said when he did get home, all he wanted to do was work out and tan, and if he wasn't doing that, he just wanted to sleep. She said that she went to a show with Chris over the weekend in Dothan, Alabama, and everyone walked around her like they were on eggshells. She felt like everyone was hiding something from her. She thought Chris might have been having an affair with one of the divas. She said all the signs were there because this wasn't the first time. He would get phone calls and he would go outside to talk, and when she asked him who he was talking to, he wouldn't answer. She also found out that he had a prepaid cell phone that she knew nothing about. She just felt so tired of everything, and she said she wasn't going to take it anymore. She told me that she needed to get away, go visit her mom and dad in Florida or her sister in North Carolina. She said that it was time that she started thinking about herself again. To me, I thought she was getting ready to leave him. She was very upset about the death of Sherry Martell. She had heard that there might have been foul play in Sherry's death, and she was very upset. She said that she kept a record of everything that Chris had done to her, and it was locked away in a safe place, just like the record she kept from her ex-husband, Kevin Sullivan. She told me to promise her that if anything ever happened to her, make sure that Chris was investigated. She said she had a bad feeling that something was going to happen, and she just couldn't shake it. She knew something was going to happen, but she didn't know what, but it was bothering her. She said she was just fed up with it. Chris's kids, David and Megan, were coming in from Canada to spend the summer. They had been into it over that, because in the past, Chris didn't spend much time with them in the summer. She told him this summer he was going to spend more time with his kids. She loved Chris very much, but she said she just couldn't take the fights and being put down anymore. She was fed up. She was worried about his state of mind, his moods, and depression had all gotten worse. She felt like he was trying to control everything she did. He had even started calling her from the road and telling her what to cook. She said she couldn't understand why he was acting like that towards her after all she had done for him over the years. She seemed ready to stand up for herself, but she couldn't shake the bad feeling. That was the last time I spoke with Nancy. When I heard on Monday they were all found dead, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. I called the house and left a message for Nancy to call me. And then it's signed Pamela Hildebrand Clark and dated July 24th, 2007. Okay, and last we're going to look at the statement from Sandra Tofolani. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Sandra is Nancy Benoit's sister. So during the investigation, Detective Turner and Detective Lee also spoke with Nancy Benoit's family in person. The family arrived in Fayetteville and stayed at Holly Schrepfer's house until the crime scene was released. Okay. That's nice. Just staying next door? No hotel? What about that Marriott right by the airport? Okay. The family members included Nancy Benoit's parents, Paul and Maureen Tofoloni, as well as her sister Sandra Tofoloni. During the conversation, Sandra was asked if she knew of any reason for Chris and Nancy to be arguing. Sandra told investigators that she knew her sister was very upset over a trust fund Chris set up for his 3 children. Sandra advised Nancy wanted Chris to change the beneficiary of the fund to her since it was in his ex-wife's name. Sandra Tofoloni advised that her sister had also commented on Chris not being able to perform in the bedroom. Sandra also knew that Nancy had taken and hidden several types of drugs from Chris in the past, which Nancy referred to as his stash. Sandra said Nancy told her that would piss Chris off to no end. Finally, Sandra stated she did not know what would have caused Chris to commit an act such as this. Once all of the duties were completed at the crime scene, the home was released to the family of Nancy Benoit. And how much time did they take carefully processing this crime scene? Not very long at all. And as you'll see, they weren't very thorough, because within 3 days after this welfare check, they had already released the home to the family, who then had to contact police more than once to return to the home to collect what the family considered items of interest. So, no offense to the family, but how do we know for certain these items were previously in the home? And why didn't police do a more thorough search? There were 3 deaths, and one was a child. Why wouldn't you turn over every metaphorical stone looking for answers? And that is the end of the statements. And I thought, since we heard from Nancy's friends and family, I'm going to end this part with a clip from a 2004 interview with Chris Benoit, and the link to the full interview, and as always, all links to articles referenced in this part are in the description box below. In part 4, we will read through the criminal investigations walkthrough of the Benoit residence, and I will have a slideshow of crime scene photos from the home that are contained in this file. But thank you so much for watching. I can't tell you how much it means to me that some people are actually watching this, and I've even gotten a few subscribers. That is awesome. So share this if you find it interesting. If there's anybody that you know who might be interested in this, please share. It will really help my channel grow. So this has been AmK. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.
And you've already said that you're an introverted guy, you're a positive guy who's not going to stick the finger out and say, look, I told you so. But is there anyone, as you're holding the belt up, that you're thinking, this one's for you?
In terms of, rub it in their face?
Yeah.
No. Because to me, it's like, that was for everyone that has ever encouraged me, that has always said that you can do it, and that was also included to everyone that said that you can do it, because to me that's the greatest revenge is success.
So you're the guy now that holds the belt, right? And young wrestlers would look at the guy with the belt and say, you know what, can I do that? I can never be like Chris Benoit. Do you feel a responsibility to the young guys? And more than that, did a guy like Hulk Hogan ever help you and give the benefit of what he had, because you wrestled with him for a long time?
Yeah, I've never wrestled a singles match against him. I've wrestled in tags with him. But just having been with him in WCW and having watched the way he carried himself, he, in my opinion, just my opinion, he was a very political guy. And you know, there were times where he'd walk by me, not say hi to me. And I didn't think that he carried the belt well and represented it well, because to me, it's like last Monday we're at TV and they have dark matches where they're local guys that come in that aren't going to be shown on TV, that they're just getting an opportunity for the office to see them wrestle. I mean, I spend 15, 20 minutes talking to these guys, encouraging them. You know, and I'll stand up and take my shirt off and say, look, it can be done. You know, believe in yourself, because that's what it's about. And it's like, there's a lot of champions that I never got that from, you know, throughout my years. And I looked at that and I thought, no, that's not right. That's not what being a champion's about.
So those guys would probably look at you and say, you know what, if I could be like one guy, it might be Chris Benoit, because you're the champion right now. If you could be one guy, who would it be? From Buddy Rogers to Triple H, if there's one guy you could say, I'd like to emulate him, I liked him, who would it be?
Well, I always emulated Dynamite Kid, but right now, to me, it's Chris Benoit. I mean, I'm very happy with who I am, and I've fallen on my face a lot, and I've been through a lot of crap, and I've been peaks and valleys. But you know, I'm very happy with who I am today and what I've achieved. That's what I've worked for. It took me 18 years, but you know, I got there, and I got there the way I wanted to, with my dignity, and I kept my dignity, my respect, the way I wanted it to be.